love thinking about the goal in this lifetime is how much of your soul, the expression of your soul, you can bring into this dimension. You're bringing more of your soul into this dimension, then your human has to figure out, what does this mean?
Just like winter's going to end, this part of the up level, the integration part, will also.
Welcome to SoulPod, where science meets mysticism and your inner wisdom leads the way. I'm your guide, Crystal Cassidy, and together we will bridge the seen and the unseen, science and spirituality, the practical and the profound. From quantum physics to energy centers, near-death experiences to extraterrestrial contact, join us as we delve into the mysteries of consciousness and journey together towards a more awakened, compassionate, and soul-connected world. Find your seat, drop in, and let's go on a journey together. Welcome back, light beings, to another episode of SoulPod, the podcast. And this week, we're going to dive into a topic that came up for us through the SoulPod team. We all noticed we were going through, at the same time, this really interesting process that I think many of us experience, which is the process of up-leveling your foundational level of consciousness. And a lot of times this looks like you're having a big breakthrough and things are going really well. Energetically, you're feeling really good. The euphoria is hitting you. And then there's the come down. And I'm joined by Kat Mansfield, who is a part of the SoulPod team. Welcome, Kat.
Hello. So happy to be here and so excited to dive into this conversation because, like you said, we all go through it on this spiritual journey.
And it can be very disconcerting and a little bit like a yo-yo effect. And so to kind of kick this conversation off, first we can talk about the euphoria. Like, what is that when you're feeling really good, everything's going really well, like synchronicities are hitting all the time? A lot of times this happens for me in the context of spiritual work. So whether that's a retreat that I'm going through, or just a really great week where my meditations are really productive, I'm having breakthroughs, everything's coming together. There's this feeling of elevation. And to the point to, I don't know about you, Kat, but to the point to where I even have the thought, I'm like, ooh, I'm flying really high right now. Mm-hmm. When is it going to come down? Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's interesting that I even have that thought, because it's an indicator that I'm operating in an energy that maybe is a little unfamiliar. So what is that like for you, that euphoric, everything's going well type of experience?
I feel like what you said resonates in terms of that synchronicities that you're experiencing, and feels like oftentimes there's like an overall ease that you step into, and a clarity oftentimes is what I feel. Definitely when I've been like really steeped in my practices, whether it be meditation, yoga, that's often when I feel like I find myself there. Through any kind of like psychedelic experience, if anyone's experienced that, I feel that often, and it's like a connection to just a more potent truth. And often it feels like I'm more connected to my power. I'm more connected to, again, that truth inside of us. And it's funny, as you were talking, I was thinking the same exact thing of when I'm in that space, what is like right adjacent to it, like right in the peripheral vision, is that feeling of fear, of like, okay, how long is this going to last? Kind of waiting for the other shoe to drop kind of thing. But I think noticing that that's there is important, because what comes next is, finding that internal safety so that we can maintain that elevated state for however long that it's meant to be there, for however long that we're meant to inhabit. But similarly, oftentimes that feels like that euphoric, that clarity and that connection to something so much greater for me.
Yeah, that's the fun part. So that's what we're all that's what we're all shooting for. It's about maintaining and like integrating what's a new energy that you're stabilizing. We talk a lot about the spiral or the staircase of awakening. This is likely a point in time where you've taken a step up and you're walking now on a new level. This can be subtle or it can be pretty profound. I think it's also giving ourselves some grace. You're not necessarily coming back down to where you were, because I don't believe that. I believe you're always moving up the spiral, up the staircase, but you might just like stay at, roughly that area for a little bit to learn how to stabilize that energy. And for me, at least, it's a lot about giving myself some grace. And instead of waiting for that shoe to drop, and this is what I'm trying to integrate now more as well, is enjoying where I'm at. Because if you're waiting for the shoe to drop, you're anticipating the future through the known. And so if we can give ourselves a little bit of grace at that point and say, you know what, I'm just going to enjoy. I'm going to enjoy it while I'm here, and we'll be back. And that's okay. But this really is a process. It's a continuous process that you're moving up this spiral, which you mentioned last time that I love so much. We'll talk a little bit about, okay, here's the elation, the up level, and you're feeling really good. And then there's this moment or a series of moments where you get checked. The universe could be checking you, the circumstances could be shifting. And at least for many of us at SoulPod that kind of experienced this the last few weeks, weirdly all at the same time, it seems like this is a point where you're circling around that new level of consciousness. We were all talking about, we're like, why does that happen? Why is there sometimes a whiplash effect? Like, for example, after retreat, you make a bunch of big breakthroughs. And this happens, we hear about this in the context of the SoulPod retreat, that you can tend to have in the weeks that follow this challenge with bringing this new energy into your old life. You have a really great day, you're firing on all cylinders, everything feels very easeful. I love that you use the word easeful. And the next day, it's like you're getting punched in the face. And it's like, why do you think, Kat, that tends to happen?
Yeah. So what came through for me is the cycle of a woman. It's like half the month you're feeling so energized and so fruitful and you could do anything. And then half the month you need more rest. And the more that we start to lean into that cycle, the more that we're actually able to create more potently and give ourselves permission to create more authentically. It's allowing for the natural cyclical nature of life to encompass our spiritual journey, right? In the integration process, we're being asked to hold space for the equal and opposite, right? It's almost like we've punched and elevated the threshold for what we can feel on the higher end of the spectrum. But then equal and opposite has to be true. So now we have to be able to hold space for the other end of the spectrum, the other end of that threshold. And so I think what happens often is that in those moments of clarity, we reach an upper limit, right? Like our nervous system only feels safe to a certain degree. And so we've reached this upper limit. We've had this clarity. We've felt that power. As we come down, we are desperately clinging onto what feels safe. So what feels known. And so because that upper limit exists, we will often feel that resistance or that tension, or our ego kind of trying to grab onto those old habits, those old behaviors, the things that we had clarity on. In that integration, we are being asked to simply like be with it. And I feel like in those up levels that we were sharing as a team, for me, so much of the invitation is to simply be with the tension in between the fully integrated up level and the past version of self, that in between where we're not quite tethered to anything. We don't quite know who this new version of self is, how to fully embody that, but we know that the past version of self no longer resonates. So we're in this in between where we might not feel like we have like shelter, and all we're meant to do in that space is hold space for it. And again, kind of lean into the knowing that there is a cyclical nature. So this is just a part of this cycle. We'll return to a space of up level. It's inevitable. Just like winter's going to end, this part of the up level, the integration part, will also end, and we'll be back in the euphoria and in the up and in the clarity and the growth once again.
There's nothing wrong with being there. There's nothing wrong with being in integration. Yeah, I love that. It made me think of the liberation and the manifestation currents. So I think of the liberation currents as moving from your first energy center up your energy body. That's the liberation current. But then we have another current which comes downwards, and that's what I call the manifestation current, or you could call it the embodiment current. And so our energy, at least in the form that we're in as a human, it's not always going up and out. There's this toroidal, not sure if I'm saying that right, but like a torus field, a torus field for our energy body. And so it's this cyclical movement of up and through and down and through. And I love that you mentioned the feminine cycle as well. When you're bringing the energy up, you're moving into the unknown and you're accessing that field, at least in the spiritual journey. When we think about the up level, you're accessing more of the unknown, you're creating more possibilities, experiencing things you haven't experienced before, and you're elevating your consciousness and you're perceiving from a new level. And then what? From a human perspective, then it's like, okay, I need to come and bring this new information, this new level of being into my human experience. And so I love thinking about like the goal in this lifetime is how much of your soul, the expression of your soul, you can bring into this dimension. And so I'm thinking that maybe this is related. You're bringing more of your soul into this dimension. Then your human has to like figure out what does this mean? And to your point, it's like, I can give myself grace. Like this is what is supposed to happen. I'm supposed to figure out how this up level, whatever that is for you, how does this affect what I've known to be true? And now I know something else to be true. If only that's possible for me. And now and now you have a choice. I think that's the other big part of it. You have a choice. Do you want to be operating in the up level? And I do think that for some people, that answer might be no. If you're in the up level, you're seeing things more clearly. This is what you were mentioning too. You're going to see ways of being that maybe aren't working for you and that you didn't previously have awareness of. And now you have a choice. And that's, I think, part of this kind of like third stage, which is the stabilization. Like we're coming up the spiral, and we're kind of circling around this new way of being. And it's like, okay, can I stabilize here? And then can I continue the journey? It's such an interesting experience we have as humans, is that this is going on possibly in every moment in some way, right?
Yeah. And I love that visual that you just painted. So we're bringing in the up level, more of our soul is coming through. Like we're remembering more of the truth of who we are, more of our soul's coming through. And then as we, reach the peak of our up level experience, and then we begin to taper into the integration, more of that human's coming through. So it's like a tidal wave of soul and then a tidal wave of ego comes in, and then the stabilizing is the like balancing, right? It's the balancing of those two energies, of those two tides. In the balancing is the moving back and forth of like, okay, where is that perfect balance of ego in this new up level and more of that soul coming in and shining through? Within that stabilization period, like you said, there's a shedding that takes place. The clarity of that comes through with that, it can also bring like grief, and it can bring so many more dynamic emotions, which is a part of that integrating, that stabilizing. And so giving yourself grace and holding space for whatever the experience is that you're having on the other side of your up level, you're really like only being asked to establish a deeper sense of internal safety so that you can meet whatever magnitude of discomfort, of tension, of struggle that you're experiencing in that moment with your whole self, with your whole body, and allow for the sensation to be wholly in you, which I think is like the hardest part of the integration and stabilization process, because that's typically when we either return to old behaviors or reach for like some sort of numbing pattern or numbing agent. And so we're given so much power in this stage of the up level, the integrating and the stabilizing. We're given so much power to really communicate to the universe that we are devoted. We're devoted to our awakening.
Ooh, I love that. The devotion part is so powerful. I think that's part of the choice, right? Is how devoted am I to my awakening? And there might be, parts of your times in your life where you're not quite there. This isn't the highest priority, and you're kind of riding the waves of the natural momentum of awakening. But I think another thing that's so important that's just popping into my mind is worthiness. Like when you have the up level and things are all falling into place. And I mean, for me, I'm having more and more of those, like, I'm just in awe of my life and of life in general. And like, oh my gosh, so much gratitude and so much, I think awe is the right word. And then the question becomes, am I worthy of this level of consciousness? Am I worthy of this time where everything's, like we say, like it's all hitting, it's all going really well, but it's deeper than the external experience of that. It's more about the internal experience of that up level and how it feels when you're in it. And then I think to eventually stabilize in it, it's like you're worthy of that. Feeling the way that whatever that is of how it's making you feel being in that up level, you're worthy of that state of consciousness and of the universe co-creating with you on a whole nother level. Hi there, SoulPod listener. If you're looking to go deeper into your spiritual journey, check out the SoulPod app on the App Store. You can start your free trial, get paired with a journey that's most relevant to where you're at in your spiritual development, and go deeper day by day through breathwork, meditation, contemplation, mantra, and meet your soul fam in your SoulPod. You can find SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today.
Worthiness feels like the glue of the stabilization process for me, right? It's like, it does feel like the foundation of that part of the up level, because it goes hand in hand with the reaching that upper limit, right? So when you reach that upper limit, we subconsciously freak out because we've reached that upper limit of safety. And so then we turn to those self-sabotage patterns, or we turn back to old behaviors. Or we reach that upper limit and we tune into that feeling of, for me in my body, when I've reached an upper limit, aka like an up level situation, it often feels like chaotic. It often feels, like I said, scary. Imposter syndrome comes through, self-doubt. And then ultimately what we are being asked in that moment is to become still and tune back into that worthiness. And I keep coming back to this because I think it goes hand in hand with establishing that worthiness. It's establishing that internal safety in your body, which is tuning into your breath, which is leaning into the tools that you have so that you can feel safe enough in your body to communicate to the universe that I am worthy of this and I'm willing to receive it, right? Like I am open to receiving everything that is meant for me, even if that feels like something or a relationship or a job or a home that is scary to think about having or being worthy of. Whatever is meant for me, I'm willing and devoted to doing the work to receive it. And so tuning into that feeling of worthiness, I guess I invite everybody who's listening to really take a moment to get still, whether it's in this moment closing your eyes or whenever you have 5 minutes, to distill down what the sensation of worthiness feels like in your body and what it feels like to truly allow yourself to receive and allow yourself to to be held by the universe.
And I like what you mentioned earlier, which is like the two waves kind of coming together, the waves of the expansion, the liberation, the higher awareness, and then the human, the ego, the personality, the earthly experience. And those waters merging in a really beautiful way, but it might be tumultuous at the beginning, right? As those two bodies of water come together. And I like this idea I think that we're coalescing on, which is that worthiness is that coming together. And that's why during the times when it feels like, oh, things have gone so well, I've been in this amazing state of being, and now things feel discombobulated and confusing, to your point, that slowing down instead of powering through it.
Yes.
Which I totally get is very tempting, because a lot of times when we don't like what we're feeling, we want to run away from it and push against it. But part of the manifestation current is sitting with it. That's second energy center, is sitting in the discomfort of whatever it is that's pushing back on you a little bit and asking you to become more aware of and to maybe choose differently. But to be able to choose, you first have to become aware of how you're feeling and what that means for you. So that stillness is so helpful. And I know of people that go on SoulPod journeys when they're in that kind of vortex or portal of integration. Can be really, really, really helpful. But why do you think, Kat, that, we noticed this as a team, that we had similar themes running between us as far as the expansion and the contraction? Why do you think collectively sometimes, whether that's a retreat everybody's experiencing and then coming back from, or just out in the world, why do you think sometimes we travel like as a collective through these phases?
Yeah, it's a good question. It goes back to the cyclical nature. It's like inevitable, right? And especially when you're on the spiritual journey, potency of your vibration is not just yours, right? It's connected to the collective. I feel like the longer I've been on my spiritual journey, the more blown away I am that typically whatever it is that I need to hear or whatever I feel like is moving through me to say, it's what somebody else needed. And it's because our journeys are running parallel. I mean, that also is so cool. What's so cool about SoulPod is that you get to be in these pods with other people who are on their journeys as well. And you're invited to share where you are in your journey on the up level, in the integration or the stabilization. Again, you're met with oftentimes similar experiences. And with that, you're reminded that you're not alone on this journey. In that vulnerability, remember your humanness. We remember that we're all navigating the human experience together. And one of the biggest parts about the integration and stabilizing parts of the journey is that you can feel alone, and you can often feel shame for being there. I don't know if we've touched on that yet, but when you have your practices and you're perhaps identify as someone who's mindful and aware, and then you find yourself in a time where you're struggling to maintain that clarity, to tap into that connectedness at any given moment. With that, there can be shame of like, I'm spiritual, what's going on? I meditate, I do yoga, why is this happening? I'm supposed to be better, I'm not making any progress. Some of the things we touched on last week, but I think in sharing, like we're saying, and in that illumination of, okay, Crystal's going through this too. Okay, our team, other people on our team are going through this too. Okay, it's not just me. Actually, it's because of the fact that I'm spiritually growing. It's because of my devotion to the spiritual path that I'm experiencing this struggle, not because I'm bad at it, not because I'm not doing it right, not because I missed a day of meditation. It's because I'm growing. It's because I'm ascending. That's why, and so I think collectively, when you or a friend or a team finds themselves in a similar pattern, it's so that we can tap into that truth of our connectedness and share our stories and share our experiences and support each other and be a pod, if you will. What about you? What do you think the collective goes through?
I mean, I think that our consciousness, we're all experiencing each other for a reason. There's a vibratory connection between not just like the SoulPod team, but everyone who's on this planet at this time. There is some sort of vibratory connection. Everything's vibration, everything's energy, right? So there's this already existing connection to everything and everyone, which you experience in those moments on the spiritual journey of profound oneness. You start to realize that's not just conceptually true, but that is foundationally true. And you know it rather than believe it. And so if that is true, then it makes sense that our experiences are co-creative. And really, we're all one thing, right? We're just experiencing the same thing from different perspectives. And so I think to your point, I wonder if some of the meaning behind it is for us to see ourselves in new ways. Like to your point, if I know that somebody that I really admire is going through something, then it makes it a little bit more okay for the fact that I'm going through something, which comes back to your point about, I think this is pretty prevalent in the spiritual space, which is that it's supposed to look a certain way.
Yes.
And that you're supposed to have, especially if you've been doing it for a long time, and I've been doing it for a long time, I can tell you that it's still an everyday process for me. There's certain things that I've expanded through, but it really is, it's a lifetime. And so when you give yourself the permission, which I have for me in my personal journey, which is that this is not an event, it's a process. And so these expansions and contractions are necessary and they're going to continue. It's just that the expansions might change shape, right? I think even after we pass and maybe even don't come back into the human form, but if we want to get really out there, this is what I think. I think if we pass,
yes, bring it.
If we pass and let's say, and you can read a little bit about this with the ancient yogis, let's say we move into another dimension of learning and experiencing and expanding and contracting, liberating and manifesting. You might not even be in a human form anymore, but the expansion and the contraction is still not going to stop. You're still doing this. It's just in a different, quite literal dimension and in a different spiral or a more expanded spiral.
Right.
So I don't know about you, but for me, that brings me so much peace. And that's really why I also wanted to do this podcast, because I want to be like, listen, the spiritual journey for the teachers and gurus or whoever, their journey is just like yours. It's just sometimes looks a little bit different, but it's the same foundations. It's the same expansion and contraction.
Totally.
So for me, that just gives me like so much relief.
Yeah. Yeah. In saying that, right, like within the spiritual world, there's a permission that we can all give each other to be in our human experience. Like we are all devoted to human, like we are devoted to our growth and we're human. And so especially in the context of an up level, I want to give people permission to experience the tantrum or like experience whatever emotion and magnitude of emotion that needs to move through you while you're in that integration and stabilization phase. And it feels extremely pertinent to just grant that permission to myself, but everybody, especially in these most recent up levels that I shared with you, Crystal, and the team, where yeah, I felt it in the moment. I was feeling so much tension in my body, so much struggle. And the only way that it could move through me in that moment was tears and like thrashing, like hitting my fists, just stomping my feet, doing whatever I needed to do for it to move through me and to really just allow myself to feel it at its magnitude, as opposed to resisting it and being like, okay, well, this much feeling of it is what feels safe, or like crying in this moment doesn't feel like that's okay, versus no, I need to do whatever I need to do to allow for the sensation of struggle to move through me in this moment. And with that, there's like a deep catharsis. It'll move through us so much faster if we just allow it to, than if we resist it.
Yeah, feel the feels. It's so simple, but so challenging sometimes. I was even thinking, I know we're not necessarily going to talk about past lives this episode.
Always a good time to talk about past lives.
Maybe another one. I was thinking about this, even a recent experience where I was feeling through a challenge and it was feeling really uncomfortable. And I was very curious about why I was having such a challenging time with this particular topic. And I started to go deeper in meditation rather than less deep. Like, let's just go straight into it. This is where it takes some courage and devotion, to your point. And I had this like breakthrough meditation where I went into a past life where the energetics of what I'm currently experiencing were also playing out. And I was like, oh, so that's what's going on. This isn't necessarily just this lifetime stuff. I'm harmonizing across space and time, not necessarily a past life, but a simultaneous life. And it gave me so much peace and clarity and insight. It was also very difficult. Like, there was big past lifetime emotions coming through this dimension. But I share that because it was like a microcosm of what we're talking about, which is I was in a contraction of sorts, and feeling into something was challenging. Decided to face the feelings, go deeper in meditation, then had the breakthrough. So I think this is the other side of the expansion, the euphoria, the kind of gut check or ego check, the stabilization. And then there's, the next breakthrough that's waiting for you.
Starts again.
It starts again. And, you're moving through another wave of the universe and the human coming together. It's just so powerful. And that's why I love, I'm biased, but I love the pods. And because it's really, the intention there is that it gives you people who have connected with you for some reason, and can be mirrors for your experience. They're people that you can choose to open yourself up to. And a lot of times, I would say 9 or 10 out of 10 times, there's something there that you can learn from their experience, and likewise them from you. Yeah. So use the pods, people.
Yeah, totally. I'm biased too. I also think the pods are such a valuable invitation for us to share. And I'm curious, I mean, for both of us, SoulPod is a tool, but I'm curious, what are some of the other tools that you utilize, especially in those more, crunchy times of the up-level cycle?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think you can also, for those listening who are like, I'm just not interested in feeling those feelings, that's also valid. You know, there's going to be points in time where that's not going to be necessarily possible for various reasons. And so give yourself a lot of grace, because I think we go through seasons of being consciously ready for those kind of expansions. I mean, as far as other modalities and ways, meditation's always been my number one. But I think even more so than that, it's listening to your intuition. So a lot of times, whether it's SoulPod, whether it's some other modality, a lot of times that modality or the teacher or the information or the book is going to come to you at the right time. Listen to your own guidance system, because you have one. It's your higher mind, and it has all of the information that you could possibly need is already within you. It's just certain modalities will help you access that inner guidance system in deeper ways. personally for me right now, breath work, transformational, psychedelic breath work, however you want to call it, but it's laying down. It's a 3-part breath. I love leading these experiences as well because it doesn't require the analytical mind, and participants can get really deep with the breath without having to engage the analytical mind. So it can go into the body, into the emotions that have been latent, and help loosen some stuff up so that it can move. So I love sound healing. I love transformational breath work. Meditation, I think, is the great stabilizer and the great transformer.
Yeah.
Psychedelics are a portal. They'll show you what's possible, and then you can choose to learn to figure out how to sustain that possibility. Yeah. What about you? What are your favorites right now?
Yeah. Similarly, meditation is always the foundation for me. It's like the number one tool in my toolkit. And that being said, there have been times where when I'm feeling, meditation is not what will quell that sensation. In fact, it would like magnify that sensation. So again, kind of like you said, tuning into your intuition and your specific toolkit and calling upon what specific tool you're being asked to use in that moment. So most of the time it's for me meditation. Other times, like I said, meditation is not what I need. And yoga is a big one for me. It's probably my like second in command, meditation then yoga. Yoga just really invites me back into my body, and it fine tuning that ability to sense in my pinky toe, to sense in my pinky finger, to really just heighten the ability to feel any sensation in my body. Yoga is that for me. I love breath work. It's something that when I've found myself in that container, it's always transformational. And it's one of the ones that I have a little bit more resistance to because it feels like it's like a workout, and you're asked to push past edges that, and personally for me in my experience, like yoga doesn't take me to, and meditation takes me to, but in a different way. So breathwork is always transformational. It's in my toolkit, but it's less called upon. And I guess most recently, what I've really been loving is really intentional microdosing with psilocybin that is conducive to really opening up. So for me, I just spent a month in New Zealand. So there, that was being in nature with nobody around. You're on a trail with nobody else for 9 hours and a very intentional psilocybin microdose and just noticing. And I guess the last one that is a little bit more of an edge for me in practicing, but is a tool that I'm working with more so, is communicating, is like asking for support, whether that be from a partner or from a friend, from another team member in SoulPod, whatever it is, like asking for support and leaning into that vulnerability at any point in the up level. Like even in the Euphoria, sometimes we can have a story around like gloating or bragging or whatever it is, but sharing. It's surprisingly like it's an edge for me. So really trying to do that more.
I think the amazing thing about that is when you're vulnerable and you're connecting with others in that way, it gives them permission too, to like, okay, soften my heart. This person needs just a little extra energy and attention. And like when I need extra energy and attention, I can remember that and like allow that, and we can lean on each other. I think that's, oh my gosh, in the collective right now, like I think we need so much more of that rather than the vulnerability being a weakness, the heart being a weakness.
It's like superpower.
It's a superpower. It's the portal of transformation. That's how you become someone that you really, really want to be and feel the way that you really, really want to feel is through vulnerability. It's the exact opposite of a weakness. So yeah, that's maybe a good place to close our episode here today. Vulnerability is your superpower. Don't forget it.
Yeah, amen.
So thank you all for joining us. Thank you, Kat, for your beautiful, beautiful wisdom.
Yeah, thank you, Crystal.
And thank you, light beings, for journeying with us today. See you next time. Thank you for journeying with us today, light being. We hope you enjoyed the episode. And before you go, we want to invite you to explore the SoulPod app, where you can immerse yourself in daily lessons, guided meditations, and breath work to develop a soul nourishing daily ritual and tune back into your own inner guidance system. You can download SoulPod in the App Store or directly from the show notes to start your free trial today and awaken the ancient wisdom within you.